Hello and welcome back to DriveDriverDriven. I'm Humble and we're back again on the Blunicorn project. Let me show you around the engine bay really quick and then we'll get on to today's task, which is to rebuild the mufflers and repack those and show you kind of what a handful of track days, some dyno time, and about 4,000 miles of street driving did to all of the packing material that used to be inside of there. So here we are, the engine bay. This is kind of where I left it. I did some cleanup work around our wiring here, just sorting it out, making it look a little bit better. Ditto for this bundle here. It still needs heat shield around it to protect it from the catalytic converter and the engine, but I'm happy with the way that things are routed. And then on to this side, it's just hard to make this mess look good, but it's better than it was previously. And that's just our part of our breather system, our injector and coil wiring, part of our steam line, which runs underneath there too. And that's just kind of all stuck in there. I still have to get a final mount for our idle air or our intake air temperature sensor. Right now that's just kind of chilling inside of the air box, but I need a better mount for that. And then everything else is just finalized. The sharp-eyed viewers among you might notice that I actually remembered to put the heat shield material around this oil line finally, so that one's not glaringly naked. But everything else went in a treat. It was really nice to be able to get that transmission to slide home that first time. It was how it should have been from the get-go, and it's really nice to finally see it slide home. I do have a tip for other Ultima builders out there using this style. This is the LS style exhaust system, and that is down here in this area where these collectors are. See if I can see it better on this side. Is right down in here. That's where the two-piece header design comes into the collector, and it's a slip fit. And that's sort of the up pipe for our catalytic converter. If you have trouble sliding those on, just using a screwdriver to pry open that bolt just a little bit, not too much, and then lubing the inside of that collector and our pipes with a little bit of oil, or if you haven't already, take a little bit of sandpaper and scrub down the collectors where they'll slide in, or sorry, scrub down the primaries where they slide into the collector, and remove any paint or coating that might make it just slightly too big in diameter so that slip fit works good. And then again, apply a little bit of oil so everything slides home nice and easy. Another tip shared with me is that if you pre-assemble the headers outside the car and then rest them in place in the chassis and then drop the motor in, you can also do it up that way. I haven't tried it that way because I found that it was too difficult to get the transmission in and out with these cats in the way, and then too much of a pain to undo them down there and then redo them up later. So you can kind of pick your poison on that. There's different methods or ways to attack that, but I just found it easiest to install those headers while it was in the car. It just takes a little bit of doing. These mufflers, if I jiggle this guy around, you can hear that something's loose in there. Well, that shouldn't be, and you can see because I've already pulled this one apart. Down in there, it's an offset inlet and outlet, and you know, it's just a steel casing, nothing to it. Got a perforated tube that slides in the middle for that offset, and then our end cap down there, and then I've removed our tips just to make it easier to work with. But this is loose inside there. It's just held in with some pressure from the packing material, and once you get the end cap in place. So the fact that that's rattling around means that there's probably not much packing left. And in fact, when I pulled the packing material out of this guy, you can see there's actually not a whole lot left. So I would say about 2/3 of that material was missing from the muffler. A lot of it had just been blown out. So this time I'm going to go with you guys to pull this apart, and we'll be able to take a look at it together and see just how much is left in there. And there you have it. That's all of the filler that was left. And it's just a stainless steel packing, it looks like. Not too much to it. Most of it just burned off or was blown out. Also, it looks like this ring, which should be welded to our end cap here, has come loose. And that's going to need to be welded back in. Alright, kind of a weird angle, but this is kind of the best way I found to work on it. So we have our muffler in the vise, just basically to hold it upright while I'm working on it. We have our perforated tube in the middle, and it's seated down on the ring on the input side. Sort of my plan of attack is to just trim the ceramic bits into smaller pieces and begin packing around our center perforated tube. Originally, my idea was to take our perforated tube and actually wrap the material around, but because it's offset to one side for the input, you end up with a very tight space on this side of the muffler at the bottom and very, very open on the other side, which if I wrapped around our centerpiece would leave voids, and that's what I want to try to avoid. I don't want that. I want to have as much of that ceramic material around here as I can, because that's what's going to do our noise and heat absorption. So I'm going to start cutting up pieces and placing them in, and then just build up until we have it filled up to the top, and there's a little bit of compression needed to push everything down and inside the can, so we have some positive pressure in there. So the material I have is just this ceramic material here. It came in a large sheet, and I'm just using a simple box knife to cut it down to size. It cuts very easily, it tears very easily, and our goal is we want to have this kind of pillowy nature to it left. We don't want to compress it fully so it's so tight, because the way insulation works is actually trapping air in these layers. When it's all crunched together like this, you're actually compromising some of its insulation characteristics. So our goal is to keep it as fluffy as we can, but pack as much as we can, if that makes sense. So I'm going to start cutting this up and start packing it inside the muffler. Now I'm just using this piece of aluminum angle to lightly pack these down. This isn't the best thing to use, it's just what I have on hand. I think in retrospect, better tool would be like a wooden dowel or something like that, just to make sure that you're not tearing the fiberglass insulation as it goes in. And again, our goal here is not to compress until it's all mushed together. I'm just trying to lightly press it into place just to fill any air gaps and also help hold this center tube in place. Alright, fast forward a bit from all the muffler packing. Unfortunately, my camera battery died and I didn't have my other USB pack charged. So, gonna just fast forward, you didn't miss much. Pulled the car out, as you can see it's getting dark. Got the mufflers installed, all the packing went in, you know, as good as it could, I guess. I mean, nothing much to say really. You just put in the packing material and screw everything back together. I did have some issues with a couple of these bolts stripping out. As you could see, I had to bring out the tap of shame, retap some of the holes and swap some of the bolts, but I only had a problem with 2 of them. Otherwise, everything else went just perfectly. Got everything put back in the car, bolts up just fine. I would say as a tip, if you're putting this system together for the first time, what I recommend is you put this mount plate in first. Just loosely secure it to these bobbins on either side. Then put the muffler in place with the gasket. Don't tighten it, just put the bolts in. Ditto for this guy. Put these in, but don't tighten them. And once everything is in place, then tighten your flange bolts first, then tighten these mount bolts second, and then lastly, these mount bolts behind last. Put the oil back in the car, got some water back in it, and unfortunately, I thought it was recording for the first startup, and I took a nice picture instead. So this time, here's a warm startup on the Ultima. right, quick post inspection. Got the car in the garage here. Looking for any fluids, anything out of place, any leaks. I don't know if it showed up on camera, but there was a little bit of smoking off of the header wrap on this side. That's just leftover, I'm guessing, from the oil spillover from our last dyno session. A couple things I want to touch on that I demonstrated on video is one of the problems I had previously was that this O2 sensor was giving wild values, and turns out I chased the leads, double checked the cable, everything was good while I had the motor out. So I replaced the sensor, and turns out it was in fact the sensor. The sensor was bad. So got another O2 sensor in there. For this particular setup, I'm using the NTK sensors. This just happened to work well typically. I'm not sure what was in there before, but now both of them are NTK. I demonstrated or pointed out the oil pressure that we actually had some now. I saw 60 and 70 PSI, which is exactly what we want to see. And everything was coming up to temp. I didn't wait to have the radiator turn up. I'll do that tomorrow when it's a little bit earlier in the day. But basically what's left is to just burp the system, heat cycle it a few times, make sure that we have enough water and coolant in the system. What I'm running is just distilled water and water wetter, but I need to heat cycle the car fully until the thermostat opens up, until the front fans turn on, and then till the fans turn off again, just to make sure that the coolant system is fully burped and bled before we go back to the dyno. You also saw me pull the car in and out a couple of times. I was feeling the clutch point for the new clutch. So I wanted to kind of give initial impressions on the clutch while it's fresh in my memory here. It's significantly easier and better pedal feel than the old single plate clutch. That's really no surprise because there's just not the same amount of load on the discs, on the transmission, on the engine, and so forth. Initial bite seems it's high-ish on the pedal. It's not right at the top, but it's not at the bottom. I would say it's in the top 25%, which is a perfect place to be. And the engagement window is very progressive. It's not super grabby like some other race clutches that I've been used to. It's, as I said, progressive. You can slip it fairly easily. The other thing is I didn't add throttle when I was engaging the clutch. I was just using idle to see if that was still a viable option. This clutch pack is actually even lighter than the old single plate. I think it weighs in around 22 pounds for clutch, flywheel, pressure plate. The whole stack is 22 pounds, and it's a smaller diameter, so this whole thing spins up really fast. And basically, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to just slip the clutch to get the car moving anymore because there's just not enough weight in the flywheel to keep the engine moving. And turns out that's not the case. The clutch is so progressive, so easy to modulate that you can easily get the car going with even the lightweight flywheel. So again, huge shout out to RPS for making such a fantastic setup. So yeah, next steps, gonna run through a few more heat cycles again, just to make sure everything's good, and then I can do a little bit of street tune while we wait for our next dyno day. A couple things to sort out with the AC and wiring still. Again, just some teething issues, but nothing too bad. And then get the interior wrapped up and get the other seat in. Once we get the clamshell on, we can go out and do some street tunes, some little baby revs. So I think that's a good place to call it for tonight. Kind of a weird setup with the mufflers and getting the car going, but honestly, I feel so relieved to have a couple of really big issues just behind us between the oil and the O2 sensor and the clutch. It's nice to have all those said and done and finally fixed. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.